The air feels heavy in the mall parking lot as 12-year-old Ethan Mason, his mop of dark hair falling over his eyes, rocks back and forth, overwhelmed by the fluorescent lights and holiday crowd. A man in an expensive suit, his father, towers over him, face contorted with rage, his diamond cufflinks catching the sunlight as his hand rises. "Stop that ridiculous rocking! I told you to behave," he hisses. But before his palm can make contact, a small figure darts between them. Miguel, the janitor's son, barely 10 years old, but with eyes that hold wisdom beyond his years. "Please don't," Miguel whispers, his threadbare jacket no shield against the winter cold. Yet somehow he stands taller than anyone in that moment. What could possibly drive a child with nothing to protect one who has everything but love? If you care about those who defend the vulnerable when no one else will, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that restore faith in humanity. Miguel Ramirez watches through the window of his family's small apartment as frost forms delicate patterns on the glass. The single-bedroom unit sits above a laundromat just 3 blocks from Westfield Mall, close enough to walk even on the coldest winter days. The rhythmic hum of industrial washers below provides a constant soundtrack to their lives. Mijo, your hot chocolate. Carlos Ramirez sets a steaming mug on their folding dinner table, his uniform still on from his 10-hour shift as head custodian at the mall. The name tag, polished to a shine despite years of wear, reads Carlos in faded letters. "Thanks, Papa." Miguel wraps his slender fingers around the warmth, thinking about the boy from the parking lot. The man who yelled at his son today, I've seen him before. Carlos sits heavily in the chair across from his son. His eyes, though tired, remain kind. Mr. Mason, Richard Mason. He owns half the commercial properties downtown, including parts of the mall. "He was going to hit him, Papa," Miguel whispers. "The boy was just rocking. He wasn't doing anything wrong." Carlos sighs, passing a weathered hand over his face. "That boy has autism. His name is Ethan. I've cleaned near their family many times. The father doesn't understand. But to hit him just for rocking? Some people think appearances matter more than feelings, mijo." Miguel knows about appearances. His own clothes, always clean thanks to his father's diligence, are worn at the edges, too big or too small, gathered from donation bins or discount racks. Yet Carlos ensures his son always has what he needs, if not what he wants. "I see Ethan sometimes when his nanny brings him to the mall," Carlos continues. "She's kind to him, but when his father comes, he shakes his head. Does he have a mother? Mrs. Mason travels for business. Elegant woman. When she's home, things seem better." Miguel stares into his hot chocolate, remembering his own mother who passed away 3 years ago. The ache has dulled, but never disappeared. No one should be hit for being who they are. Carlos studies his son with quiet pride. Since Maria's death, Miguel has developed a perception unusual for a 10-year-old, a sensitivity to others' pain. That sometimes worries Carlos. "You were brave today, but also careful, yes? Mr. Mason is not someone to anger." "I didn't think, Papa. I just moved." Miguel looks up, his expression earnest. The boy, Ethan, he looked so scared, like he was somewhere else in his mind, trying to escape. Carlos reaches across the table, his work-roughened hand covering his son's smaller one. "You have your mother's heart, but promise me you'll be careful. We cannot afford trouble." Miguel nods, understanding the fragility of their situation. Carlos's job provides their apartment, their health insurance, their stability. Yet Miguel can't forget Ethan's face, the momentary connection when their eyes met, the flash of surprise that someone had stepped between him and his father's rage. After finishing his homework, Miguel stands at their small bathroom sink, brushing his teeth. Through the thin walls, he hears his father on the phone, speaking quietly in Spanish to Tia Lucia. He catches fragments. The Mason boy, concerned, "What if it costs me my job?" Miguel rinses and spits. In the mirror, his reflection stares back, resolute despite his father's worries. Something about Ethan calls to him, perhaps recognition of another kind of loneliness. Before climbing into bed, he peeks out the window toward the sprawling hills, where the wealthiest families live. Somewhere up there, Ethan Mason exists in a world physically close but realistically unreachable. Miguel makes a silent promise to the night. He will find a way to reach him. Ethan Mason sits cross-legged on his bedroom floor, surrounded by meticulously arranged astronomy books. His fingers trace the constellation patterns on the pages, while the ceiling of his room projects a perfect recreation of the night sky, courtesy of a $5,000 planetarium system his mother installed last birthday. The Mason estate sprawls across 3 acres in Hillcrest Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in town. From Ethan's window, the mall where today's incident occurred appears as a distant concrete block, insignificant against the manicured landscape. "Ethan, it's time for your therapy." Mrs. Winters, his private behavioral therapist, stands in the doorway. She's the 3rd therapist this year, the others having been dismissed by Richard Mason for being too soft on his son. Ethan doesn't look up, his attention fixed on Orion's belt. "3 perfect stars aligned," he whispers, rocking gently. "Mrs." Winters approaches cautiously. She has learned that interrupting Ethan's focus can trigger distress. "The stars will wait for you. We have our session now, then dinner." Downstairs, Richard Mason paces the marble-floored study, phone pressed to his ear. "No, Peterson, I don't care what environmental impact report says. The shopping center gets built. Find the loopholes." He notices Mrs. Winters guiding Ethan toward the therapy room and covers the receiver. "Make sure he stops that damned rocking. Before Elizabeth gets home tomorrow, it's embarrassing." Mrs. Winters gives a tight nod, ushering Ethan past. The boy flinches when his father's voice rises again into the phone. In the specially designed therapy room, Ethan sits at a table, hands flapping slightly, a self-soothing mechanism that Richard has also tried to eliminate. "You were upset today." "At the mall," Mrs. Winters begins. "Can you tell me what happened?" Ethan's gaze remains downcast. Too loud, too bright, too many people breathing. "And what did we practice when things get overwhelming? Count backwards from 20. Focus on one thing." Ethan's voice is monotone, reciting rather than understanding. "What about the boy who helped you?" Ethan's hands stop flapping momentarily. "Small boy, brown eyes, not afraid of father." Mrs. Winters makes a note in her tablet Ethan rarely notices. "Other children." "He stood up for you." He said, "Please don't." Nobody says that to father. The evening progresses with mechanical precision. Therapy session. Nutritionist-approved dinner, eaten alone at the massive dining table. Supervised shower. Medication administered by the night nurse. At precisely 8:30 p.m., Ethan is in bed, but not asleep. He never sleeps well when his mother is away. Elizabeth Mason's business trips have increased over the past year, each one longer than the last. When she's home, she buffers Richard's impatience, creates space for Ethan to be himself. His door cracks open, casting a slice of light across his weighted blanket. "Mr. Ethan?" It's Rosa, the housekeeper, breaking protocol by visiting after hours. "I brought you this." She slips something onto his nightstand, a small perfect apple, polished to a shine. Their secret ritual, Rosa's small rebellions against the strict dietary regimen Richard imposes. "Thank you," Ethan whispers, not looking directly at her, but reaching for the apple nonetheless. "Your mama comes home tomorrow," Rosa says softly. "She called to check on you. Did you tell her about the mall?" Rosa hesitates. "No, mijito. Your father said not to worry her." After Rosa leaves, Ethan takes a bite of the forbidden apple, savoring its sweetness. His thoughts drift to the small boy who stood between him and his father's rage. In 12 years, few people have ever directly challenged Richard Mason, especially not on Ethan's behalf. He reaches under his mattress for his hidden journal, another forbidden item, and opens to a fresh page. With careful precision, he draws the parking lot scene, his father's raised hand, his own cowering figure, and between them, a small silhouette with determined eyes. Beside the drawing, he writes a single word: friend. Greenfield Academy sprawls across 10 acres of prime real estate. its brick buildings and manicured lawns projecting precisely the image its wealthy patrons expect. The East Wing, bearing the Mason family name on a gleaming plaque, houses the newly renovated science laboratories. Miguel sits on a bench in the courtyard, watching the parade of luxury SUVs and town cars in the drop-off lane. His father had left for work an hour earlier, so Miguel walks to school each morning, arriving well before the first bell. A sleek black Bentley pulls up, and Miguel straightens. The chauffeur opens the rear door, and Ethan Mason emerges, clutching his tablet to his chest. The boy looks different at school, hair neatly combed, designer clothes perfectly pressed, special noise-canceling earbuds discreetly in place. "Mason!" a group of 8th graders call out mockingly. "Hey, Rain Man! What's the square root of 10 million?" Ethan doesn't respond, his gaze fixed on the pavement as he follows a precise path to the building entrance. Miguel notices how he avoids every crack in the sidewalk with practiced steps. Ms. Rivera, the 6th grade teacher, appears beside Miguel. "Those boys shouldn't tease him," she says quietly. "Ethan is brilliant with numbers. He just processes the world differently." "Now, we're in the same school," Miguel says, surprise evident in his voice. Ms. Rivera gives him a curious look. "Yes. Ethan's been here since kindergarten. You've never noticed him before?" Miguel shakes his head. Despite Greenfield's considerable size, it seems impossible he wouldn't have seen Ethan. But the school operates like two separate institutions, the scholarship students like Miguel, largely invisible to the wealthy majority. "He's in the advanced learning program," Ms. Rivera explains. They have separate classrooms in the West Building. The bell rings and Miguel hurries to class. But his thoughts remain with Ethan. During morning break, he slips away from his usual spot and ventures toward the West Building's courtyard. There, he spots Ethan sitting alone under an oak tree, engrossed in something on his tablet. 3 boys approach Ethan, their movements casual but purposeful. Miguel recognizes the leader, Bradley Hoffman, son of the school board president. "Hey, freak show," Bradley says, loud enough for Miguel to hear. "Let me see what you're doing." Ethan doesn't look up. "Plotting stellar navigation coordinates. Binary star system." Bradley exchanges amused glances with his friends. "You know what, Mason? You're even weirder than your father says." He reaches for the tablet. "Let me see that." Ethan tightens his grip. "Please don't touch my things." Or, "What? You'll have another meltdown?" Bradley mimics rocking back and forth. "My dad was at your house for that dinner last month. He said you completely lost it because the food touched on your plate." Miguel steps forward without thinking. "Leave him alone." The group turns, surprised. Bradley's expression shifts from shock to contempt. "Who invited the scholarship case?" "Now, I'm just saying, find something better to do," Miguel continues, his voice steadier than he feels. "My father donated $500,000 to this school last year," Bradley sneers. "What did yours donate? The gum under my desk?" The insult stings, but Miguel holds his ground. "At least my father taught me manners." A teacher approaches, ending the confrontation. Bradley and his friends retreat, but not before Bradley whispers, "This isn't over, janitor's kid." The rest of the day passes in a blur. During last period, Miguel is called to the counselor's office. Ms. Patel smiles warmly as he enters. "Miguel, how are you settling in this semester?" "Fine, thank you." "I saw what happened in the courtyard today," she says gently. "Standing up for Ethan Mason was brave." Miguel shifts uncomfortably. "Someone should." "I agree." Her expression turns serious. "But I should warn you, the Masons are influential here. Richard Mason single-handedly funded our new science wing. So Ethan gets bullied and no one stops." "It because his dad gives money?" Ms. Patel looks pained. "It's not that simple, Miguel. We've tried to address the bullying, but Mr. Mason has specific ideas about how his son should be treated. He believes Ethan needs to toughen up." "That's wrong," Miguel says simply. Ms. Patel studies him thoughtfully. "You know, we've been looking for peer mentors for our special learning program. Would you be interested?" For the first time that day, Miguel smiles. "Yes, I would." The Special Learning Center occupies a quiet corner of Greenfield Academy's West Building. Unlike the sterile modernity of the regular classrooms, this space feels intentionally cozy. Soft lighting, curved furniture, and walls painted in calming blues and greens. Miguel arrives for his first mentoring session, nervously clutching his permission form. Ms. Patel introduces him to Dr. Chen, the center's director. Miguel, we pair mentors based on shared interests, Dr. Chen explains. What do you enjoy doing? Stars, Miguel says immediately. Astronomy. My mom used to take me stargazing before he trails off, then continues more firmly. I've read every library book on constellations. Dr. Chen's eyes light up. Then I know exactly who you should work with. Ethan sits at a computer scrolling through NASA's website. He doesn't look up when they approach, but his fingers pause over the keyboard. Ethan, this is Miguel. He's going to be your Tuesday study partner. He loves astronomy too, Ethan continues, staring at the screen. The Perseid meteor shower peaks in August with approximately 60 meteors per hour. Miguel hesitates, then responds, the Geminids in December are actually better. Sometimes 80 or more. Ethan's fingers resume typing, but slower. The Geminids originate from an asteroid, not a comet. Unusual. 200. Phaethon, Miguel says, recalling the information from a library book. Scientists aren't sure if it's a dead comet or an asteroid. For the first time, Ethan glances sideways at Miguel, not directly at his face, but an acknowledgement. You know things. Dr. Chen smiles. I'll leave you two to get acquainted. Miguel, just remember the approaches we discussed. For 30 minutes, they orbit each other cautiously. Miguel follows the guidelines. No sudden movements, no demanding eye contact, respecting personal space. He sits beside Ethan, not opposite, and lets silence exist without rushing to fill it. I saw you, Ethan says suddenly. In the parking lot. Miguel nods. I saw you too. Why did you do that? Because he was going to hit you, and that's wrong. Ethan processes this. My father says I embarrass him when I rock or flap. It's inappropriate. Social behavior. My dad says everyone stims somehow. He bites his lip when he's thinking hard. I tap my fingers. You rock. It's just how bodies work. Ethan looks at him directly for the first time. A fleeting glance that feels significant. Your father is the head custodian. Carlos Ramirez. Employee. Number 5472. Works Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Miguel blinks in surprise. How do you know that? I remember everything I read. His badge. And he's kind. He never makes loud noises with the cleaning cart when I'm nearby. The session ends too quickly. As Miguel gathers his things, Ethan remains focused on the computer. See you Thursday? Miguel asks. Tuesday and Thursday, 2:15 p.m., Special Learning Center. Study partners. Miguel smiles. Right. Over the next few weeks, their connection grows, in small, meaningful increments. Miguel discovers that Ethan communicates more freely through text messages, so they develop their own system. Miguel brings a second tablet to their sessions, and they type conversations while sitting side by side. He learns that Ethan loves apples, but can't stand their texture if the skin is removed. That bright lights make his brain feel like television static, that he can recite every constellation visible in each season from memory. In turn, Ethan absorbs Miguel's stories about his mother, her collection of star myths from around the Chulwe world, her talent for finding rare constellations in light-polluted skies. Through the tablet, Ethan asks questions no one else has bothered to ask. Were you sad when she died? Do you remember her voice? Does your father cry sometimes? Miguel answers honestly, finding unexpected relief in Ethan's straightforward curiosity. One Thursday, Miguel arrives to find Ethan distressed, rocking intensely. What's wrong? Miguel asks, settling into their usual spot. Ethan doesn't respond verbally, but types frantically. Father saw our text conversations, says I'm not to befriend the help's son, says you're using me to get money or advantages. Miguel feels the words like a physical blow. That's not true. I know, Ethan types. You never ask for anything, but he's taken my phone. No more messages. Says you're a bad influence. Says you encouraged me to be more abnormal. What does? Your mom think? She's in Tokyo until next week. Father says if she finds out I've been causing problems, she'll be disappointed in me. Miguel's heart sinks. He recognizes the manipulation tactic. His father had warned him about men like Richard Mason, who use shame and isolation to control others. We can still be friends at school, Miguel types. He can't stop that. Ethan's rocking slows slightly. Friends, he types, the word appearing as a question. Are we? Yes, Miguel types back. Definitely. Elizabeth Mason's heels click purposefully across the marble foyer of her home, her designer luggage trailing behind her. After 3 weeks in Tokyo negotiating international contracts, the silence of the mansion feels both welcome and unsettling. Mrs. Mason, welcome home. Rosa hurries forward, taking her coat. Mr. Mason is in his study. Shall I tell him you've arrived? No need, Rosa. How's Ethan? Something flickers across Rosa's face, concern quickly masked. He's in his room, working on his astronomy project. Elizabeth heads upstairs, pausing outside her son's door. She knocks gently. Ethan? It's Mom. Inside, Ethan sits cross-legged. On the floor, star charts spread around him. He doesn't look up, but his fingers pause their methodical arrangement of the papers. You're home 2 days, 7 hours, and 33 minutes earlier than scheduled. Elizabeth smiles, entering his careful orbit. She knows not to rush forward for a hug. Physical affection happens on Ethan's terms, not hers. I missed you. Too much to stay away? She sits on the edge of his bed, noticing changes in her absence. Ethan's hair is cut shorter than he prefers. His comfort items, the soft blue blanket, the astronomy encyclopedia with the worn cover, are missing from their usual places. New haircut. Father says it looks more normal. Ethan resumes arranging his star charts. The previous style was juvenile and unkempt. Elizabeth feels a familiar tension headache building behind her eyes. And where's your blue blanket? Inappropriate attachment object for a 12-year-old. Dr. Winters says I need to develop more age-appropriate coping strategies. Dr. Winters, the therapist Richard hired after dismissing Dr. Garcia, who had worked so well with Ethan for years. Elizabeth had opposed the change, but relented when Richard insisted Dr. Winters' behavioral approach would help Ethan fit in better. She moves closer, noticing something she hadn't seen initially, a fading yellowish mark on Ethan's forearm. Ethan, what happened here? She keeps her voice casual, reaching gently for his arm. He pulls away, continuing his work. I was behaving inappropriately at the mall. Father corrected me. Elizabeth freezes. Corrected you how? I was rocking. People were staring. It reflected poorly on the family. Ethan. Her voice is firmer now. Did your father hurt you? Ethan doesn't answer directly. There was a boy, small. He stepped between us and said, "Please don't." Then Father brought me home and explained why my behavior was unacceptable. Elizabeth's hands begin to shake. She forces herself to remain calm. When did this happen? 13 days ago. Tuesday, 4:17 p.m., Westfield Mall parking lot. She stands, struggling to contain her anger. I need to speak with your father. We'll talk more later, okay? Downstairs, she finds Richard in his study, phone pressed to his ear as usual. He looks up, surprised by her early return. Elizabeth, let me call you back, Peterson. He hangs up, rising to greet her with a practiced smile. You're home early. How was Tokyo? What happened at the mall, Richard? No preamble, no pretense. His expression hardened slightly. I assume Ethan's been complaining he had one of his episodes in public. It was embarrassing. There's a bruise on his arm. Richard waves dismissively. He was flailing. I had to restrain him. You know how he gets. That's not restraint, Richard. That's abuse. Don't be dramatic. He pours himself a scotch. Dr. Winters agrees that Ethan needs firmer boundaries. He's not a little boy anymore. The rocking, the hand flapping, it has to stop. Those are his coping mechanisms. You can't just force him to. I can and I will. While you've been off playing international businesswoman, I've been dealing with the reality of raising a... He stops himself. A what, Richard? Our son? He sighs, softening his approach. Elizabeth, I know you're tired from your trip, but trust. Me, things are improving. Dr. Winters is making real progress with Ethan. His teachers report fewer disruptions in class. Because he's terrified, not because he's better. She steps closer. And what's this about forbidding him from having a friend? The janitor's son? Richard's expression darkens. That boy is using Ethan, probably put up to it by his father. They see dollar signs? Or maybe he's just being kind to our son. Something we could use more of in this house. I've already handled it. The friendship is inappropriate. End of discussion. Elizabeth stares at her husband, seeing him with sudden clarity. When did he become this person, or had he always been? And she'd simply been too busy building her career to notice? I'm calling Dr. Garcia tomorrow, she says firmly, and Ethan's blanket and books are being returned to him immediately. Elizabeth, no, Richard. I've let you make too many decisions about Ethan's care. That ends now. As she turns to leave, Richard calls after her. Don't undermine me on this, Elizabeth. You're not here enough to understand what's best for him. The words hit their mark. Elizabeth falters momentarily, the familiar guilt resurfacing. How many important moments had she missed? How many times had she convinced herself that providing financially was enough? But the image of the bruise on Ethan's arm strengthens her. Resolve. She continues walking, leaving Richard's protests behind her. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the Mason Estate's grand ballroom. Nearly 100 of the city's elite mingle beneath them, champagne flutes in hand, celebrating the launch of Richard's newest development project, a luxury retail complex that will replace the aging community center downtown. In the kitchen, Carlos Ramirez supervises the catering staff, his usual mall custodian uniform replaced by formal attire. The catering company often hires him for extra events, and despite his exhaustion from working double shifts all week, the additional income is too valuable to decline. Mr. Ramirez, Rosa approaches, looking anxious. Could you check the west? Hallway, one of the guests spilled wine. Carlos nods, gathering cleaning supplies. As he passes the main staircase, he notices Ethan sitting alone on the top step, hands pressed over his ears, rocking slightly. Ethan? Carlos keeps his voice soft. Are you okay? Ethan doesn't respond. His eyes squeeze shut against the sensory. Assault downstairs, too many voices, too many perfumes, too many expectations. Carlos climbs a few steps. Would you like me to find your mother? She's talking to important people, Ethan whispers. Father says I must appear for 15 minutes. I've been here for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. Carlos recognizes the signs of mounting distress. Perhaps you could wait in your room until needed? Father says no hiding. Hiding is for babies. Ethan's rocking intensifies. 7 minutes and 39 seconds. In the ballroom, Elizabeth circulates among guests, her social smile masking her concern for Ethan. Since her return from Tokyo 3 days ago, tensions with Richard have escalated. Their arguments about Ethan's treatment have grown increasingly bitter, culminating in Richard's ultimatum. Ethan will appear at tonight's event and behave appropriately, or Elizabeth can expect Richard to fight her on every proposed change to Ethan's care. Richard approaches, champagne in hand. Where's Ethan? The Prestons want to see him. Richard, he's overwhelmed. Maybe we should... Elizabeth, his tone carries a warning. We agreed. 15 minutes of normal social interaction. That's all I'm asking. Before she can respond, a commotion erupts from the hallway. A woman's startled cry is followed by the sound of shattering glass. They rush toward the noise, pushing through curious guests. In the west hallway, they find Ethan curled into a tight ball on the floor, hands over his ears, screaming. Beside him, a shattered champagne flute and a woman dabbing at her silk dress. He just went crazy, the woman exclaims. I merely commented on how handsome he looked, and he knocked the glass right out of my hand. Richard's face hardens with fury and embarrassment. Elizabeth, get him upstairs. Now. Carlos, cleaning supplies still in hand, witnesses the scene from the edge of the gathering crowd. He watches as Elizabeth kneels beside her son, speaking soothingly despite her evident distress. Ethan, it's Mom. You're safe. Let's go upstairs. Where it's quiet. Ethan continues rocking, lost in his sensory overload. Elizabeth attempts to guide him up, but he recoils from her touch. Richard steps forward, his patience visibly evaporating. Enough of this nonsense. He grabs Ethan's arm roughly. Get up, you're making a scene. Richard, don't, Elizabeth protests. You're making it worse? Ethan's scream intensifies at the unwanted contact. In a reflexive movement, he strikes out, his hand catching Richard's jaw. The room falls silent. Richard's expression transforms from embarrassment to cold rage. Without a word, he seizes Ethan's arm and drags him toward the stairs, ignoring Elizabeth's protests and Ethan's continued distress. Richard, stop! Elizabeth tries to intervene, but Richard blocks her with his free arm. I'll handle this, he hisses. Go back to our guests and salvage what's left of this evening? Carlos steps forward instinctively, then hesitates, painfully aware of his position. The warning in Richard's glare is unmistakable. Interfere and lose everything. Elizabeth stands frozen, torn between social obligation and maternal instinct. Richard, please. Mrs. Mason, one of the senior investors, approaches. Perhaps we should give them some privacy. These situations are delicate. Carlos watches helplessly as Richard drags a still screaming Ethan upstairs. Elizabeth, surrounded by concerned guests, offering hollow platitudes about difficult children, is effectively trapped in the social obligation Richard has created. 40 minutes later, the party continues with forced gaiety. Elizabeth has disappeared, presumably upstairs with Ethan. Richard has returned, composed and apologetic, spinning the incident as just one of those challenges special needs families understand. Carlos, cleaning the last of the broken glass, notices Rosa hurrying down the service stairs, her face ashen. What's wrong? He asks quietly. Mr. Mason, she whispers. I heard. The boy was screaming, and then silence. Mrs. Mason is crying, and there's Carlos. His back has welts. Carlos feels the weight of the information like a physical blow. Are you sure? Rosa nods, her eyes frightened. Mrs. Mason is with him now. She asked for ice packs, said he fell, but she shakes her head. No fall. Makes marks like that. Carlos thinks of his son, of Miguel's determination to protect Ethan. He thinks of his job, of their precarious financial situation, of the consequences of challenging a man like Richard Mason. Then he thinks of Ethan, alone and in pain, and knows there is really no choice at all. Miguel awakens to hushed voices in the living room. The digital clock beside his bed reads 1:27 a.m. He slips from beneath his covers and pads silently to his bedroom door, cracking it open just enough to hear his father's conversation. Welts. Across his back, Lucia. The boy couldn't even lie down. Carlos's voice is strained with emotion. Mrs. Mason was beside herself, but still making excuses. Richard didn't mean to. He's under so much pressure. Miguel's Aunt Lucia responds, her voice sharp with indignation. And what did you do, Carlos? What could I do? I'm the help. If I say anything, I lose my job, our apartment, Miguel's scholarship. So you stay silent while a child is beaten? A heavy sigh. I documented what I saw, took photos when Rosa distracted Mrs. Mason. I'm not doing nothing, but I need to be smart about this. For Miguel's sake, too. Miguel closes his door silently, his mind racing. Ethan hurt, his father's anguish, the impossible choice. The next morning, Miguel finds his father at the kitchen table, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Papa, Miguel says, setting down his cereal spoon. I heard you last night about Ethan. Carlos looks up, startled. Miguel, that wasn't for you to hear. But I did hear, and we have to help him. Carlos rubs his face wearily. It's complicated, mijo. No, it's not, Miguel insists, with the clear moral certainty of childhood. Hurting kids is wrong. Simple. The world isn't always... You always say we do right even when it's hard, Miguel interrupts. You said that's what Mom would want. The foi? Mention of Maria silences Carlos momentarily. Finally, he nods. You're right, but we need to be careful. Mr. Mason is powerful. He could hurt us too, in different ways. I have an idea, Miguel says, leaning forward. But I need your help. At school, Miguel searches for Ethan but can't find him. When he asks Ms. Rivera, she simply says Ethan is out sick. The careful way she avoids eye contact tells Miguel there's more to the story. During lunch, Miguel approaches Ms. Patel's office. The counselor welcomes him with her usual warmth, but her smile fades when he explains why he's there. Miguel, these are very serious concerns, she says after listening to his carefully edited version of events. Have you personally witnessed any abuse? No, but my dad has. And I've seen bruises on Ethan's arms. Ms. Patel makes notes, her expression troubled. I've had concerns myself, but Ethan never confirms anything when I ask. And Mr. Mason is persuasive with the administration. So nothing happens, Miguel says. Flatly, I didn't say that. Ms. Patel straightens in her chair. I've documented every concerning incident, but without concrete evidence or Ethan's testimony. What if I could get evidence? Miguel asks. My dad took photos at the party. Ms. Patel's eyes widen. Miguel, that would be significant, but your father could lose his job. He knows. We talked about it. After school, Miguel meets his father at the mall food court. Carlos hands him a paper bag containing his dinner. Did you speak with Ms. Patel? Carlos asks. Miguel nods. She said she needs evidence. Carlos pulls out his phone, showing Miguel a conversation with Rosa. Ethan's at home with a bad flu. Elizabeth wanted to take him to the doctor, but Richard insisted their family physician make a house call instead. That's suspicious, right? You can tell Ms. Patel that. It's not enough, mijo. Carlos hesitates. But I sent the photos to Ms. Rivera. She's known Ethan since kindergarten and has suspected problems for years. Will she help? She wants to meet us tomorrow. Her classroom before school. The next morning, they arrive at Greenfield Academy. As dawn breaks, Ms. Rivera is waiting, her normally cheerful face solemn. I've been documenting concerns about Ethan for 3 years, she tells them, placing a thick folder on her desk. Unexplained absences after behavioral incidents, bruises, dramatic personality changes whenever his father is involved in school activities. Why hasn't anything been done? Carlos asks. Ms. Rivera's expression hardens. The administration has been reluctant to pursue investigations. The Mason family donated the entire West Wing. Money shouldn't matter more than a child's safety, Miguel says. You're right. It shouldn't. Ms. Rivera's gaze shifts to Carlos. These photos you took, combined with my documentation and Ms. Patel's records, it might be enough for social services to investigate. Richard Mason has the best lawyers in the state, Carlos warns. And Ethan has us, Ms. Rivera counters. Plus, I've spoken with Elizabeth Mason many times. She loves her son. She's just trapped in her own way. What's our next step? Miguel asks. I'll contact social services today, Ms. Rivera says. Carlos, you should prepare yourself. Once this starts, I know. I could lose everything. Carlos places his hand on Miguel's shoulder. But some things matter more. Miguel feels a surge of pride for his father, mixed with fear for what lies ahead. Will Ethan be safe until then? Ms. Rivera and Carlos exchange glances. Rosa says Elizabeth hasn't left his side since the incident, Carlos offers. That's something. And we'll be checking in daily, Ms. Rivera adds. Miguel, if Ethan returns to school, keep being his friend. He'll need that more than ever. As they leave the classroom, Miguel thinks about Ethan's star charts and quiet courage. Don't worry, Papa, he says, taking his father's hand like he used to when he was smaller. We're doing the right thing. Carlos squeezes his son's hand, hoping desperately that being right will be enough to protect them all. Richard Mason slams the letter onto his mahogany desk, his face flushed with fury. Social services? In my home? His attorney, James Wheeler, maintains his professional calm. It's a preliminary inquiry, Richard. Standard procedure when concerns are raised. Concerns? What concerns? Richard paces the length of his study. Elizabeth has coddled that boy into helplessness, and now I'm the villain for trying to instill some discipline? The report mentions specific incidents, the mall altercation, the fundraiser, and Wheeler clears his throat uncomfortably. Photographs of injuries. Richard stops pacing. Photographs? What photographs? Apparently taken during your fundraiser, showing welts on Ethan's back. Richard's expression shifts from shock to calculated anger. Who would? Understanding dawns. The janitor, Ramirez. He was working that night. Wheeler sighs. Richard, focus on the immediate issue. Social services will interview Ethan and Elizabeth separately. They'll inspect your home. If they find cause for concern, they won't, Richard cuts him off. Elizabeth will explain that. Ethan's condition makes him prone to self-injury during meltdowns. His therapist will confirm his behavioral issues. This will disappear. And if it doesn't, Richard straightens his Italian silk tie. Then we'll handle it. In the meantime, I have a pest problem to address. At Westfield Mall, Carlos finishes mopping the food court when his supervisor approaches. Ramirez, office, now! Inside the cramped security office, the mall manager, Douglas Freeman, waits with a grim expression. Carlos, we've received a complaint about your work performance. Carlos stiffens. What complaint? My record is perfect. Freeman looks uncomfortable. It's come from higher up. The ownership group, they're claiming inventory discrepancies in sectors you've cleaned. That's impossible. I know, Carlos. Freeman's voice softens. But Mason Property Holdings owns 40% of this mall. When Richard Mason makes a complaint, understanding settles like a weight on Carlos's shoulders. I'm being fired. 2 weeks suspension, pending investigation. But between us, Freeman lowers his voice. Start looking for another job. And the apartment, we have 30 days after. Termination, Carlos finishes numbly. I know the contract. At Greenfield Academy, Miguel sits in Principal Hoffman's office, confusion written across his face. Transfer to Jefferson Middle School, he repeats. But why? My grades are good. I haven't broken any rules. Principal Hoffman adjusts his glasses. Miguel, scholarship placements are reviewed annually. The committee feels Jefferson might be a better fit for your circumstances. My circumstances? Miguel echoes. Your father's employment situation has changed, I understand. News travels fast in small communities. That's not fair. You can't punish me because someone's targeting my dad. Principal Hoffman's expression hardens. Young man, this is not punishment. It's simply a reassessment of resources. Jefferson is a perfectly adequate school. This is about Ethan Mason, isn't it? Miguel's voice rises despite his effort to remain calm. Because we reported what his father did to him. That's enough. Principal Hoffman stands. The decision is final. You'll finish the week, then report to Jefferson on Monday, in the hallway. Outside, Miguel bumps into Bradley Hoffman, the principal's son. Heard you're getting kicked out, Charity Case, Bradley sneers. My dad says your father tried to blackmail the Masons. Pretty stupid move for a janitor. Miguel clenches his fists, but remembers his father's warnings about fighting. That's a lie. Whatever. Ethan's a freak anyway. Don't know why you bothered. Miguel walks away, tears of frustration burning behind his eyes. In the classroom, Ms. Rivera notices his distress immediately. Miguel? What happened? When he explains, her face pales with anger. This is retaliation. It's illegal. Doesn't matter. They're doing it anyway. Ms. Rivera kneels beside his desk. Listen to me. Richard Mason is powerful, but he's not above the law. What your father did was brave and right. And now we might be homeless, Miguel whispers. After school, Miguel finds his father waiting in their old station wagon instead of walking home as usual. Papa? I thought you were at work. Carlos's face is lined with exhaustion. I was suspended. We need to talk. At home, they sit at their small kitchen table, the reality of their situation laid bare between them. 2 weeks suspension means no pay, Carlos explains gently. And I don't expect to get the job back. Because of the photos? Because you tried to help Ethan? Carlos nods. Richard Mason made some accusations, false ones, but it doesn't matter. And they're kicking me out of school too. Miguel stares at his hands. Bradley said we tried to blackmail the Masons. Lies. Carlos's voice is firm. Never doubt we did the right thing, mijo. But what are we going to do now? Before Carlos can answer, a knock sounds at their door. He opens it to find Elizabeth Mason standing in their hallway, looking wildly out of place in her designer clothes. Mrs. Mason? Carlos steps back in surprise. May I come in? Her voice is tight with anxiety. Please, I need to talk to you. Carlos hesitates, then gestures her inside. Miguel watches wide-eyed as Elizabeth Mason, whose home could fit 20 of their apartments, perches awkwardly on their worn sofa. "Richard knows it was you who took the photos," she says without preamble. "He's retaliating." "We're aware," Carlos replies coolly. Elizabeth twists her wedding ring. "I didn't know he would do this. I came to—" she falters. "To what, Mrs. Mason?" Miguel asks. She meets his gaze directly. "To tell you I've left him. I've taken Ethan to my sister's house, and I've hired my own attorney." She pulls a business card from her purse. "This lawyer has agreed to help you too, for the wrongful suspension and Miguel's scholarship." Carlos stares at the card without taking it. "Why would you help us?" Elizabeth's composure cracks slightly. "Because you helped my son when I was too afraid to." Ms. Rivera stands before the school board, her posture straight, despite her trembling hands. 7 members sit in judgment, including Bradley's father, Principal Hoffman, who avoids meeting her gaze. "Thank you for agreeing to hear me," she begins. "I'm here to address serious concerns about ethical violations occurring at Greenfield Academy." Principal Hoffman clears his throat. "Ms. Rivera, we've already discussed your theories. This board meeting has a full agenda. My documentation spans 3 years," she continues undeterred. "It details systematic dismissal of abuse concerns regarding a student, concerns validated by social services' current investigation." A murmur passes through the board members. A woman in a crimson blazer, Dr. Thompson, the newest member, leans forward. "What documentation are you referring to?" Ms. Rivera places a thick binder on the table. "Every incident involving Ethan Mason, every bruise photographed, every behavioral change following time with his father, every report I filed that was subsequently buried." Principal Hoffman's face flushes. "Those are confidential student records you're misappropriating." "They're copies of my own observations and reports," Ms. Rivera counters. "Reports that mysteriously disappeared from Ethan's official file." Dr. Thompson opens the binder, frowning as she scans the contents. "These photos, when were they taken?" "Various dates over 3 years. The most recent followed the Mason fundraiser 2 weeks ago." "And you're claiming these injuries were caused by Richard Mason?" Principal Hoffman's tone is incredulous. "Also, respected businessman and our most generous donor, I'm stating facts, documented with dates and contexts." "The conclusion seems obvious." Dr. Thompson continues examining the documentation. "It says, here you reported concerns 8 separate times. What responses did you receive?" Ms. Rivera's gaze fixes on Principal Hoffman. "I was told Ethan's autism caused self-injurious behaviors, that his parents were doing their best with a difficult child, that extraordinary families deserve extra privacy and understanding." "Reasonable responses," another board member comments. "Would they be reasonable if the child's father wasn't Richard Mason?" Ms. Rivera challenges. "If he hadn't donated the West Wing?" The room falls silent. Principal Hoffman adjusts his tie uncomfortably. Furthermore, Ms. Rivera continues, "Miguel Ramirez's scholarship was revoked as direct retaliation for his father's role in documenting Ethan's injuries. This violates our anti-discrimination policies and potentially state law." "That's absurd," Principal Hoffman sputters. "The scholarship committee met unusually off schedule, the day after social services contacted the Masons." Ms. Rivera finishes, "I have the meeting minutes." Dr. Thompson's expression has grown increasingly troubled. "These allegations are serious. What are you asking of this board, Ms. Rivera?" "Reinstate Miguel Ramirez's scholarship immediately. Open a formal investigation into the handling of abuse reports, and place Principal Hoffman on administrative leave pending that investigation." The room erupts in protests. Principal Hoffman pounds his gavel. "This is outrageous. You have no authority." "Actually," a new voice interjects from the doorway, "she has considerable standing." All heads turn to see a woman in a tailored suit entering with a briefcase. "I'm Jennifer Kwan, attorney for Elizabeth Mason and Ethan Mason. Ms. Rivera's documentation has been subpoenaed as evidence in the domestic violence case against Richard Mason. Interfering with that evidence would constitute obstruction of justice." Principal bucks. Hoffman's face drains of color. This meeting is adjourned. We need to consult the school's legal counsel. Before you go, Attorney Kwan continues smoothly, you should know that Carlos Ramirez has filed a wrongful termination suit against Westfield Mall, citing retaliation by Richard Mason, the temporary restraining order protecting both families from further harassment includes educational access for Miguel Ramirez. Ms. Rivera gathers her materials, meeting Dr. Thompson's gaze. I've dedicated 17 years to this school. I've loved teaching here. But I cannot stay silent while we sacrifice children's safety for donations. Later that afternoon, Ms. Rivera sits in her empty classroom, packing personal items into a cardboard box. Though not officially suspended, she's been invited to take paid leave while the situation resolves. A knock at her door reveals Miguel and Carlos. Ms. Rivera? Miguel approaches hesitantly. We heard what happened at the board meeting. She offers a tired smile. News travels fast, Elizabeth told us, Carlos explains. Her lawyer called after the meeting. You risked your job for Ethan. For me. Miguel places a small handmade card on her desk. Thank you. Ms. Rivera's eyes mist as she reads the carefully printed words. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they carry teacher badges. It's not over, she says, tucking the card carefully into her purse. The board is split. Dr. Thompson has called for an emergency session tomorrow. Will you be okay? Carlos asks. If they fire you? Ms. Rivera straightens her shoulders. I have 23 former students now in college who write me letters, 37 who still visit on holidays, one who's now a teacher himself. That's my legacy, not a paycheck. Miguel impulsively hugs her. You're the best teacher ever. As they leave, Carlos pauses in the doorway. Elizabeth asked if you could come to her sister's house tonight. Ethan has been asking for you, and there's something important she wants to discuss with all of us. Is Ethan okay? Carlos's expression is grim. Social services wants him to testify. They need more than just photographs. They need his words. Ms. Rivera nods, understanding the weight of what lies ahead. Tell Elizabeth I'll be there at 7. The local news vans arrive outside Greenfield Academy just as classes begin. Parents slow their luxury vehicles in the drop-off lane, staring at the gathering media with a mixture of curiosity and alarm. By mid-morning, the story breaks across. All channels. Prominent developer, Richard Mason, accused of child abuse. Private school, implicated in cover-up. Inside Bradley Hoffman's spacious home, his father paces frantically between phone calls. Damage control, he mutters repeatedly. We need immediate damage control. Bradley watches from the staircase as his father's carefully constructed world begins crumbling. Principal Hoffman has already been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The emergency board session had been swift and decisive, with Dr. Thompson leading the charge. This is all because of that stupid janitor's kid, Bradley seethes. His status as the principal's son had afforded him special privileges. Now, those privileges are threatened. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hoffman speaks in hushed tones to another school parent. Of course, we support Richard completely. This is clearly Elizabeth having some sort of breakdown. Everyone knows Ethan is difficult, and those photos could be from anything. The boy has meltdowns. The Martinez girl in Bradley's class says her mother cleans the Mason house sometimes, the other parent whispers. Says she's seen bruises before but was afraid to lose her job if she reported it. Mrs. Hoffman's smile grows brittle. Well, that's convenient timing, isn't it? Across town at Westfield Mall, another kind of gathering takes place. Mall employees cluster in break rooms and service corridors, discussing Carlos's suspension in troubled tones. He's worked here 15 years, says Diane from the food court. Perfect record. Then suddenly he's stealing? Nobody believes that. Mason throws his weight around again, adds Hector, another custodian. Carlos was just protecting a kid. But what happens to Miguel? That school was his ticket to college. In the mall's administrative office, Douglas Freeman makes a difficult decision. Taking a deep breath, he dials a number. Channel 7. News? I have information about Richard Mason's retaliation against a whistleblower. Meanwhile, at her sister Rebecca's modest suburban home, Elizabeth Mason sits at the kitchen table, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Across from her, Jennifer Kwan reviews documents while Rebecca prepares tea, the emergency. Custody order is temporary, Jennifer explains. Richard's attorneys will fight it aggressively. How long do we have? Elizabeth asks. The hearing is in 10 days. We need to be prepared for Richard to use everything in his arsenal. Your business. Trips, your absences, claims you enabled any abuse by not being present. Elizabeth flinches. He's right about that part. I should have been there more. Rebecca squeezes her sister's shoulder. You were building a career while supporting your family. Richard was the one hurting Ethan, not you. A judge might not see it that way, Jennifer warns. We need Ethan's testimony to make this stick. Without it, it's your word against Richard's, and he has considerable influence in this community. The doorbell interrupts their conversation. Rebecca returns moments later with Carlos, Miguel, and Ms. Rivera. Thank you all for coming, Elizabeth says, her voice steadier than she feels. I know Richard has already made your lives difficult because you helped us. How's Ethan? Miguel asks immediately. Better physically, emotionally. Elizabeth gestures toward the back of the house. He's in the sunroom with his star charts. It's the first thing he asked for when we arrived. Miguel hesitates. Can I see him? Elizabeth nods gratefully. He's been asking for you. As Miguel heads toward the sunroom, Jennifer addresses the adults. We need to discuss the community response. The media coverage has created two distinct camps. I've been getting calls all day, Ms. Rivera confirms. Half the parents support the investigation, while others are rallying behind Richard, claiming this is all a misunderstanding or a vindictive divorce tactic. The mall employees are backing Carlos, Jennifer notes. They're planning a demonstration tomorrow. Carlos looks startled. They shouldn't risk their jobs for me. That's exactly what people said you shouldn't do for Ethan, Ms. Rivera points out gently. In the sunroom, Miguel finds Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor, meticulously arranging star charts in a pattern only he understands. The bruises on his arms have faded to yellowish smudges. Hey, Miguel says softly. Ethan doesn't look up but stops arranging. You came. Of course I did. We're friends. Father says I shouldn't have friends like you. Miguel sits down carefully, not too close. What do you think? Ethan considers this. Seriously, I think Father is wrong about many things. It's the most direct criticism of Richard that Miguel has ever heard from Ethan. My dad might lose his job because he tried to help you, but he says he'd do it again. My mother left Father because of me, Ethan responds. She says it's not my fault, but it is. No, Miguel says firmly. It's your dad's fault for hurting you. That's why adults are supposed to protect kids. Not hurt them, Ethan finally looks at him. They want me to talk about it, to strangers, in a courtroom. Miguel remembers his mother's illness, how hard it had been to discuss the details with doctors and social workers. It's scary, but you won't be alone. Will you be there? If they let me, yes. Ethan returns to his star charts. Orion is a hunter in the sky. He's brave. I don't know how to be brave. You already are, Miguel tells him. Standing up to someone bigger and stronger than you, that's the bravest thing there is. Dr. Sarah Chen's office feels nothing like a typical therapist's space. Instead of muted colors and formal furniture, the room bursts with sensory-friendly options, wobble chairs, fidget tools, light projectors creating gentle patterns on one wall. A small tent in the corner provides a retreat space when conversations become overwhelming. Ethan sits cross-legged on a beanbag, a weighted blanket across his lap. He doesn't make eye contact with Dr. Chen, but his body language is more relaxed than it's been in weeks. How are you feeling today, Ethan? Dr. Chen asks, her voice gentle but not patronizing, uncertain, nervous, apprehensive. Ethan lists his emotions methodically, relieved. That's a complex mix. Can you tell me more about the relief? Father isn't here. No one tells me to stop rocking or flapping. Mother cries sometimes, but not because she's angry with me. Dr. Chen nods. You feel safer now, physically safer, emotionally confused. Elizabeth watches through the observation window, her hand pressed against the glass. Jennifer Kwan stands beside her, taking notes. He's communicating more clearly than I've ever seen, Elizabeth whispers. Richard always insisted Ethan couldn't express himself this well. Because Richard never wanted him to, Jennifer responds. An articulate Ethan could tell others what was happening at home. Inside the therapy room, Dr. Chen introduces a drawing journal. Sometimes it's easier to show feelings than to say them, she explains. Would you like to try? Ethan accepts the journal cautiously. What should I draw? Whatever comes to mind when I say safety. Ethan thinks for a moment, then begins drawing with surprising precision. A small figure between two. Larger ones, arms outstretched protectively. Can you tell me about this? Dr. Chen asks when he finishes. Miguel, in the parking lot. He made himself a barrier between me and Father's anger. That was brave of Miguel. Yes? Ethan starts another drawing without prompting. This is after. The new image shows a larger figure looming over a small one, arm raised. In the background, a woman's face watches, tears visible. After Miguel stepped in, what happened when you got home? Ethan's hand tightens around the pencil. Father said I had embarrassed him, that I needed discipline to learn appropriate behavior. And what did that discipline involve? Ethan doesn't answer verbally, but turns to a new page and draws, with quick, precise strokes, a belt, a small figure curled protectively, red marks across the figure's back. Dr. Chen keeps her voice steady, despite the disturbing image. Was this the first time? No. 7 previous occasions with the belt, 23 with hand, uncounted instances of physical restraint exceeding necessary force. Elizabeth gasps behind the glass, her composure finally breaking. Oh, God, he's been counting them all along. Over the next several sessions, Dr. Chen helps Ethan develop tools for the upcoming court appearance. They practice simple techniques, deep breathing, pressure points on his palms, a silent signal when he needs a break. They role-play potential. Questions preparing him for the intimidating courtroom environment. The judge will want to know if you understand the difference between truth and lies, Dr. Chen explains. Can you explain that to me? Truth is factual reality. Lies are deliberate falsehoods intended to manipulate perception. That's a very good definition, Ethan. Father says I fell down the stairs. That's a lie. He pushed me when I wouldn't stop. Humming, that's the truth. Each session strengthens Ethan's ability to articulate his experiences. The drawing journal fills with images, some disturbing, others hopeful. A recurring figure appears frequently, Miguel, depicted with a subtle halo of stars around him. During their 4th session, Miguel joins them at Ethan's request. I have something to show you, Ethan says, flipping to a specific page in his journal. The drawing shows 2 boys beneath a night sky filled with constellations. One boy points upward while the other watches, both smiling. This is a possible future, Ethan explains. Statistical probability uncertain, but desired outcome. Miguel studies the image. Is that us looking at stars together? Yes. At the observatory, in the science center. When this is over, that's a great plan, Miguel says. I'd like that. Dr. Chen observes their interaction with professional interest and personal warmth. Miguel, Ethan, and I have been developing some strategies for the courtroom. Would you like to help? Together they create a communication system based on their shared interest in astronomy. Different constellations become code words for Ethan's emotional states. If you say Orion, that means you're feeling brave and ready, Miguel explains. If you say Taurus, that means you're getting angry and need a moment. And Cassiopeia means I'm overwhelmed and require immediate break, Ethan adds. By their final preparation session, Ethan has filled nearly half the journal. On the last page, he carefully draws the courthouse as he imagines it, with supporting figures surrounding him like constellations. Are you ready for tomorrow? Dr. Chen asks gently. Ethan closes the journal. Statistically, preparation increases success probability, but cannot guarantee outcomes. That's very true. How are you feeling about seeing your father? Ethan considers this. Afraid, but also Orion. Dr. Chen smiles at his use of their code word for courage. Yes, Ethan, I see Orion in you too. The courthouse stands like a stone sentinel in the center of downtown, its classical columns and broad steps projecting authority and permanence. Today, those steps are divided, literally and figuratively. On one side gather Richard Mason's supporters, business associates, country club members, and the wealthier Greenfield Academy families. On the opposite side stand Carlos's mall co-workers, teachers from the school, including Ms. Rivera, and a small but vocal group of parents from the special education program. Between them, news crews capture the scene as Jennifer Kwan guides Elizabeth and Ethan up the steps. Ethan wears noise-canceling headphones, his gaze fixed on the ground, counting steps to manage his anxiety. Behind them follow Carlos and Miguel, serving as both witnesses and moral support. Mason family arriving now, a reporter announces into her microphone. This preliminary hearing will determine temporary custody arrangements while abuse allegations are investigated. Richard Mason continues to deny all charges, claiming his estranged wife is using their son as a pawn in divorce. Proceedings. Inside the courthouse, the hearing room feels cavernous yet suffocating. Rich wood paneling and formal portraits of judges past create an atmosphere of intimidating tradition. Ethan sits beside his mother, his hands working a discreet fidget tool beneath the table. When Richard enters with his attorney, James Wheeler, the energy in the room shifts palpably. Richard looks immaculate in a tailored suit, his expression appropriately concerned yet confident. He attempts to catch Elizabeth's eye, but she stares straight ahead. All rise for the Honorable Judge Mariana Diaz, the bailiff announces. Judge. Diaz is a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that miss nothing. She surveys the room briefly before addressing the attorneys. Let me be clear from the outset, she begins, her voice firm. This is not a criminal trial. That's a separate matter, being handled by the district attorney's office. Today we are solely focused on what custody arrangement best serves the minor child's interests during the investigation period. I'll hear brief opening statements, then testimony from the primary parties. Wheeler presents Richard's case first, his approach smooth and practiced. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman and devoted father who has worked tirelessly to provide his son with the best therapeutic interventions, educational opportunities, and material comforts. These sudden allegations arise only after Mrs. Mason decided to pursue divorce, suggesting ulterior motives. He produces affidavits from Richard's carefully selected character witnesses, Dr. Winters, Principal Hoffman, business associates who've observed Richard with Ethan at controlled social events. Each of these professionals attests to Mr. Mason's patience with a child who presents significant behavioral challenges. Wheeler's framing is subtle but clear. Ethan is the problem, not Richard. Jennifer Kwan approaches the matter differently. Your Honor, this case isn't about Richard Mason's public persona or professional accomplishments. It's about documented patterns of physical and emotional abuse, witnessed by multiple parties and substantiated by photographic evidence, medical records, and testimony from educators who've worked closely with Ethan for years. She places Ethan's drawing journal on the evidence table. Most importantly, it's about a child finding the courage to speak his truth, despite being systematically silenced by the very person who should have protected him. Judge Diaz reviews the submitted evidence thoughtfully. Mr. Wheeler, your client claims these injuries resulted from self-harm during meltdowns. Yet, Dr. Chen's assessment indicates the pattern and positioning of injuries are inconsistent with self-inflicted wounds. How do you respond? Wheeler smiles confidently. Your Honor, with all due respect to Dr. Chen, she's met with Ethan for a total of 6 hours. Dr. Winters has worked with him for months and can attest to his self-injurious behaviors. Dr. Winters was hired after Mr. Mason dismissed Ethan's previous therapist of 3 years, Jennifer counters, a therapist who had documented concerns about possible abuse. The proceedings continue with clinical precision. Elizabeth testifies, about her growing awareness of Richard's treatment of Ethan, her voice sometimes faltering, but her resolve steady. Richard presents himself as a concerned father trying to establish necessary discipline in his wife's frequent absences. When Carlos takes the stand, Wheeler attacks immediately. "Mr. Ramirez, isn't it true you're currently suspended from your position at Westfield Mall, pending theft investigations?" "Objection," Jennifer interrupts. The alleged theft investigation began only after Mr. Ramirez reported the abuse. The timing strongly suggests retaliation. "Sustained," Judge Diaz agrees. "Mr. Wheeler, unless you can demonstrate relevance beyond attempting to impugn the witness's character, move on." Carlos testifies about what he witnessed at the fundraiser, his voice steady despite Wheeler's attempts to undermine him. Ms. Rivera follows with her years of documentation about Ethan's injuries and behavioral changes. Throughout the proceedings, Ethan remains silent, watching and listening. When Richard glances his way, Ethan doesn't cower as he once might have. Instead, he straightens slightly, his fingers finding the constellation pattern Miguel taught him to trace when afraid. "Orion, the hunter. Brave, Your Honor," Jennifer says as the day winds toward conclusion. "We request that Ethan's testimony be taken in your chambers, with only essential personnel present. Given his autism and the traumatic nature of his experiences, standard courtroom procedures would cause undue distress." Wheeler objects immediately. "Your Honor, my client has the right to face his accuser, even if that accuser is his child." Judge Diaz considers briefly. "I'll allow Mr. Mason to observe via closed-circuit television, but he will not be physically present during the child's testimony. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. As the court adjourns, Miguel catches Ethan's eye from the gallery and forms a silent constellation with his fingers. Ethan mirrors the gesture, a small moment of connection amid the clinical legal proceedings. Night settles over Rebecca's neighborhood as Ethan paces the guest bedroom. His movements precise, 3 steps forward, pivot exactly 180 degrees, 3 steps back. The rhythm helps regulate his mounting anxiety about tomorrow's testimony. Soft knock interrupts his pattern. "Ethan, it's Miguel. Can I come in?" Ethan doesn't answer verbally but opens the door, resuming his pacing immediately. Miguel enters, carrying a small backpack. "Your mom said you haven't eaten dinner," Miguel says, setting his bag on the bed. "My dad made empanadas. They're still warm." Food has been difficult for Ethan since leaving home. New textures, unfamiliar preparations. But Miguel's father has discovered that Ethan will eat Carlos's empanadas, the consistent shape and texture providing needed predictability. "Thank you," Ethan says, accepting the carefully wrapped package but not opening it yet. "Tomorrow is testimony day." "Yeah." Miguel sits on the edge of the bed. "Are you scared?" "Terrified, anxious, apprehensive." Ethan continues pacing. "Father, we'll be watching on a screen. His eyes will still see me." Miguel nods, understanding the fear isn't irrational. "I brought something that might help." He unzips his backpack and pulls out a small device that fits in his palm. It's a mini planetarium projector. "My mom gave it to me before she died." He turns off the bedroom light and activates the projector. Suddenly, stars blanket the ceiling and walls. Hundreds of pinpricks of light creating familiar constellations. Ethan's pacing slows, then stops entirely. His gaze travels across the improvised night sky, his encyclopedic knowledge automatically identifying patterns. Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Cassiopeia. "When I get scared, I look at the stars," Miguel explains, sitting beside Ethan, who has finally settled on the bed. "Mom said even when things seem dark, the stars are still there. We just can't always see them." Light pollution and atmospheric conditions often obscure celestial visibility, Ethan agrees, his voice calmer. But the stars remain in position regardless. They sit in comfortable silence, watching the stars slowly rotate across the bedroom. Walls. Ethan unwraps an empanada and takes a careful bite. "The constellation system we created," Ethan says after a while, "for the courtroom. It's scientifically inaccurate, but emotionally effective." Miguel smiles. "Sometimes things don't have to be scientifically accurate to be true." Paradoxical, but correct. Ethan finishes his empanada methodically. I haven't been able to look at actual stars since leaving home. Mother says it's not safe to use the telescope on the balcony. Father might drive by. I know somewhere we can go, Miguel says suddenly. Not tonight, but after everything's settled. The mall has an observatory on the roof, part of the science center. My dad has keys, the Peterson Observatory, 16-inch Schmidt Cassegrain reflector telescope, public viewings on Thursdays and Saturdays. You've been there before? No. Father said science centers are for children who can't afford proper educational resources. Miguel frowns. That's not true. Some of the astronomers who volunteer there work for NASA. Father says many untrue things, Ethan observes with newfound clarity. His perspective is frequently inaccurate. Another knock at the door reveals Elizabeth, her expression softening at the star-filled room. It's getting late, boys. Big day tomorrow. 5 more minutes? Miguel asks. We're talking about the observatory at the mall. Elizabeth hesitates, then nods. 5 minutes, then Miguel needs to go home and everyone needs sleep. After she leaves, Ethan turns to Miguel. Will you be at court tomorrow? Front row. I'll be doing this when you need strength. Miguel forms the Orion constellation with his fingers. And this, if you need a break? He switches to Cassiopeia's distinctive W shape. And if Father's attorney says untruthful things about me? Miguel forms a different pattern. Taurus. Remember what Dr. Chen taught you? You know what's true. No one can make you doubt your own experiences. When Carlos arrives to collect Miguel, he finds the boys still surrounded by stars, speaking a language of constellations that only they fully understand. In this moment of connection, the courthouse and Richard Mason seem galaxies away, rather. Then mere hours. Late that night, unable to sleep, Ethan returns to the star projector Miguel insisted he keep. Watching the patterns sweep across his ceiling, he rehearses what he'll say tomorrow. Not the exact words, Dr. Chen emphasized, telling his truth naturally, rather than memorizing responses, but the core points that need to be made. Father hurt me, repeatedly, deliberately. I was afraid to tell because he said no one would believe me. Simple facts, but terrifying to speak aloud to strangers, knowing his father will hear every word. Ethan traces Orion in the projected stars, then forms the constellation with his fingers as Miguel taught him. Courage isn't the absence of fear Dr. Chen had explained. It's feeling afraid but taking action anyway. In the bedroom next door, Elizabeth also lies awake, tormented by what she should have seen sooner, should have stopped. The signs were there. Ethan's increasing withdrawal, his fear of Richard's footsteps on the stairs, the unexplained bruises dismissed as self-injury or accidents. She had been so careful to select the right schools, the best therapies, the most advanced assistive technologies, yet she had failed at the most fundamental task, protecting her child from harm. "I'm sorry," she whispers to the darkness. "I'm so sorry I didn't see." From Ethan's room comes the soft sound of movement, his familiar. Pacing resuming, Elizabeth rises, padding quietly to his door. "Ethan, can't sleep?" Inside, she finds him walking his precise pattern beneath the canopy of stars, his expression determined rather than distressed. "Practicing being brave," he explains without breaking stride. Like Orion. Elizabeth watches her son. Brilliant, literal, resilient Ethan, finding his way through fear with the help of a simple star projector and a friendship that transcends the barriers Richard tried to place between them. "You're already the bravest person I know," she tells him, and for the first time in weeks, she truly believes tomorrow might bring justice rather than more pain. Richard Mason arrives at the courthouse flanked by a public relations team, in addition to his legal counsel. His entrance is perfectly choreographed, grave but confident, concerned rather than defensive. He pauses just long enough for cameras to capture his dignified profile before disappearing inside. "Mr. Mason, do you have a statement?" reporters call out. "I love my son deeply," Richard responds, his voice catching with practiced emotion. "These allegations are devastating, not just to me, but to our entire family. I look forward to the truth being established in court." Inside, The second day of proceedings begins with Richard taking the stand. Under Wheeler's careful questioning, he paints a compelling narrative. A devoted father struggling with an exceptionally challenging child, a successful businessman who prioritized family despite tremendous professional demands. Ethan's condition requires constant structure and sometimes physical redirection, Richard explains, his expression earnest. There were times I needed to restrain him during meltdowns to prevent self-injury. And the incident at the fundraiser? Wheeler prompts. Heartbreaking, Richard sighs. Ethan became overwhelmed by the crowd and began acting out aggressively. When I attempted to guide him upstairs, he fell against a decorative railing. The resulting bruises were purely accidental. Wheeler produces statements from party guests who witnessed Ethan's meltdown, but not what occurred upstairs. Would you describe your relationship with your son, Mr. Mason? I love Ethan unconditionally, Richard says, making deliberate eye contact with Judge Diaz. His autism presents unique challenges, but I've devoted enormous resources to providing him with the best care possible. Ask anyone in the community. I've sponsored autism awareness events donated to research. When Jennifer begins cross-examination, her approach is methodical rather than confrontational. Mr. Mason, you've emphasized your devotion to Ethan's care. Could you list the therapists who've worked with him over the past 3 years? Richard hesitates slightly. Dr. Garcia initially, then Dr. Winters most recently. And why was Dr. Garcia replaced? Her approach wasn't showing sufficient progress. Jennifer consults her notes. Interesting, because Dr. Garcia's records indicate Ethan was making excellent progress under her care. In fact, she documented significant regression only after you began insisting on attending therapy sessions. Richard shifts uncomfortably. I wanted to be involved in my son's treatment. Dr. Garcia's notes from March 14th state, and I quote, "Father interrupted session to correct Ethan's stimming, creating visible distress." When advised that stimming serves an important regulatory function, Mr. Mason stated he wouldn't tolerate behaviors that make his son look, quote, "retarded in public." A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Richard's carefully constructed facade shows its first crack. Dr. Garcia clearly misunderstood. Is that why you fired her and hired Dr. Winters? Because she misunderstood your priorities for Ethan? Objection. Argumentative, Wheeler interjects. I'll rephrase, Jennifer says smoothly. Mr. Mason, was Dr. Winters aware that Dr. Garcia had reported concerns about possible physical discipline to Ethan's school? Richard's jaw tightens. I wouldn't know what Dr. Garcia reported. Yet phone records show you called Principal Hoffman immediately following that report, and the next day, Dr. Garcia was informed her services were no longer required. The pattern continues as Jennifer methodically contrasts Richard's public persona with documented behaviors. She introduces credit card statements showing purchases of restraint devices not recommended by any of Ethan's medical providers. Text messages between Richard and Elizabeth reveal his explosive anger when Ethan displayed autistic behaviors in public. By lunch recess, Richard's polished veneer has visibly deteriorated. In the courthouse restroom, Wheeler confronts him. You need to get it together. The judge is watching your every reaction. This is character assassination, Richard hisses. They're making me look like a monster. No, they're presenting evidence. Evidence you assured me didn't exist. Wheeler straightens his tie with irritation. The nanny is testifying next. What surprises should I expect from her? Richard pales slightly. Nora? She wouldn't say anything against me. I doubled her salary last year. When proceedings resume, Nora Sullivan takes the stand. In her 50s, with a kind face and steady demeanor, she had been Ethan's nanny for 8 years before resigning abruptly 3 months ago. Ms. Sullivan, why did you leave your position with the Mason family? Jennifer asks. Nora glances at Richard, then at her clasped hands. I couldn't continue in good conscience. Could you elaborate? I witnessed Mr. Mason's treatment of Ethan deteriorate over time. What began as impatience escalated to, she pauses, choosing her words carefully, excessive physical discipline. Did you report these concerns? To Mrs. Mason, yes. She spoke to Mr. Mason, and things would improve temporarily. But whenever she traveled for business, the pattern would resume. Why didn't you report to authorities? Nora's eyes fill with tears. I was afraid of losing my job. I have a daughter in college, bills to pay. Mr. Mason made it clear that loyalty was expected. And what prompted your resignation? In February, I returned early from a day off and found Ethan locked in his closet. He'd been there for hours because he wouldn't stop humming during an important business call. That's when I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore, no matter the financial consequences. Wheeler's cross-examination attempts to portray Nora as disgruntled or financially motivated, but her testimony remains consistent. When she describes finding Ethan silently rocking in the dark closet, several jurors visibly wince. By day's end, Richard's carefully constructed narrative has begun crumbling beneath the weight of witness testimony. As court adjourns, he confers intensely with Wheeler in hushed tones. Across the aisle, Elizabeth sits with her sister, their expressions solemn but resolute. Tomorrow, Ethan will testify, the final and most crucial element in determining whether he remains protected from the father who has shaped both his greatest fears and his emerging courage. Judge Diaz's chambers feel less intimidating than the courtroom, smaller, with natural light streaming through windows overlooking a small courtyard. Still, Miguel's heart pounds as he sits in the witness chair, his school uniform neatly pressed, his father's encouraging nod from the corner providing small comfort. Miguel, do you understand what it means to testify under oath? Judge Diaz asks kindly. Yes, Your Honor. It means I promise to tell the truth. That's right. And you understand. How important truth is in this proceeding? Yes, ma'am. This is about keeping Ethan safe. The judge smiles slightly at his directness. Very well, Ms. Kwan, you may proceed. Jennifer approaches, her manner gentle but professional. Miguel, can you tell us how you first met Ethan Mason? Miguel straightens in his chair. At the mall, in the parking lot. Mr. Mason was yelling at Ethan because he was rocking. That's something Ethan does when he's stressed. Mr. Mason raised his hand to hit him, and I stepped between them. That was a brave thing to do. Why did you intervene? Miguel shrugged slightly. It wasn't brave. It was just right. You don't hit kids for being themselves. What happened after that day? I found out we went to the same school. Ms. Patel, our counselor, asked if I wanted to be Ethan's peer mentor because we both like astronomy. We became friends. Did Ethan ever discuss his home life with you? Not at first. He doesn't talk much sometimes, but we would text and he started telling me things, like how his father would get angry if he stimmed or had meltdowns. Stimmed? That's like repetitive movements that help people with autism feel better. Rocking, flapping hands, stuff like that. Ethan's dad wanted him to look normal all the time. Said it was embarrassing. Did Ethan ever mention physical discipline? Miguel nodded solemnly. He showed me bruises once. Said his father used a belt when he had a meltdown during a business. Dinner? Ethan said it wasn't abuse, though, just necessary correction for inappropriate behavior. Miguel's voice changes slightly, mimicking Richard's formal cadence. Those were his father's words, not his. Did you tell anyone about these bruises? My dad. Then Ms. Rivera. She already had concerns about Ethan. Jennifer retrieves a tablet from her materials. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce evidence item 34, video recordings taken by Miguel Ramirez at Greenfield Academy. Judge Diaz nods. Proceed. The tablet screen shows shaky footage clearly taken surreptitiously. Ethan sits alone at lunch, methodically arranging his food. 3 older boys approach, led by Bradley Hoffman. Hey, Spaz, Bradley's voice comes through, clearly. Daddy says you're going to get shipped off to a special school if you don't start acting normal. Ethan doesn't respond, continuing his careful food arrangement. I'm talking to you, retard. Bradley knocks Ethan's tray, disrupting his organized meal. Ethan begins rocking, clearly distressed. The video ends abruptly. A second clip begins, showing Richard Mason at a school function, gripping Ethan's arm tightly while smiling for photographs. The camera zooms in on Ethan's face, silent panic evident despite his forced stillness. A third clip shows Ethan, after a meltdown, hiding in the sensory room at school. The camera pans to reveal bruising on his wrist. "Miguel, why did you take these videos?" Jennifer asks when the footage ends. "Because nobody believed Ethan, or they didn't want to believe him because his dad gives money to the school. I thought, if there was proof." "When did you start recording these incidents?" "After the mall. I could see Ethan needed help, but didn't know how to ask for it." When Wheeler begins cross-examination, his approach is carefully non-threatening, aware of how attacking a child witness would appear, but his questions carry subtle implications. "Miguel, your father works as a janitor at Westfield Mall, is that correct?" "Yes, sir. He's the head custodian." "And your family's financial situation could be described as modest?" Jennifer interjects. "Objection. Relevance? I'm establishing the witness's potential motives, Your Honor," Wheeler argues. "I'll allow limited questioning on this line, but tread carefully, Mr. Wheeler." Wheeler continues, "Miguel, before befriending Ethan, were you aware of the Mason family's wealth?" "I knew they were rich. Everyone at school knows that. And since becoming involved in this case, your father has received legal assistance for his employment dispute, correct? Assistance arranged by Mrs. Mason." Miguel's eyes flash with understanding. "You think I made friends with Ethan for money, or that my dad took pictures to get something from them?" "I'm simply asking if your family has benefited from—" "My dad lost his job because he tried to help Ethan," Miguel interrupts, his voice rising slightly. "We might lose our apartment. How is that a benefit?" Wheeler shifts tactics. "The videos you recorded, you didn't have permission from the school or from Ethan, did you?" "No. But I didn't have permission to stop Mr. Mason from hitting Ethan in the parking lot either. Sometimes you have to break small rules to stop big wrongs." A hint of a smile crosses Judge Diaz's face at the simple wisdom in the statement. "No." Further questions, Wheeler concludes, recognizing the witness is only strengthening the case against his client. As Miguel leaves the chair, Judge Diaz calls him back momentarily. "Young man, I want to commend your courage. Not many people, adults included, would take the stands you have." Miguel glances toward the door, knowing Ethan waits outside for his turn. "Ethan's the brave one, Your Honor. He has to live with what happened. I just had to see it and say something." In the hallway, Miguel finds Ethan sitting with Dr. Chen, rocking slightly, his drawing journal clutched to his chest. "How was it?" Ethan asks without looking up. "Not bad," Miguel answers. "The judge is nice. Just tell the truth." "Like Dr. Chen said." Ethan's fingers form the Orion constellation. Miguel mirrors the gesture. "Remember our system?" Miguel says quietly. "I'll be right outside the whole time." Dr. Chen smiles at the interaction. "Ready, Ethan?" Ethan rises, still clutching. His journal. Statistical probability of successful testimony, uncertain, courage level, Orion. Ethan sits perfectly still in Judge Diaz's chambers, his drawing journal balanced precisely on his knees. Unlike the previous witnesses, he hasn't been asked to sit in the witness chair. Dr. Chen explained that formal seating arrangements might increase his anxiety. Instead, they've created a small semicircle of chairs with Ethan positioned where he can see the door. "Ethan, do you know why you're here today?" Judge Diaz asks gently. "To provide factual testimony regarding father's disciplinary methods and their physical and psychological impact." Ethan's voice is soft but clear, the words carefully rehearsed. "That's right. And Dr. Chen tells me you understand the difference between truth and lies. Truth is factual reality. Lies are deliberate falsehoods designed to manipulate perception." Judge Diaz smiles slightly. "Well put. Are you comfortable answering Ms. Kwan's questions now?" Ethan nods, his fingers tracing the constellation pattern. Against his leg, Jennifer begins carefully. "Ethan, can you tell us about the rules in your house?" "Multiple categories of rules. Appearance rules, no rocking, flapping, humming, or other stimming behaviors where people might see. Schedule rules, precise timing for all activities. Behavior rules, eye contact during conversations, no discussing special interests with guests, no interrupting father's business calls." "What happened when you broke these rules?" Ethan's rocking begins, subtle but noticeable. Consequences varied based on infraction severity and father's stress levels. Minor infractions, privileges revoked. Moderate infractions, confinement to room or closet. Severe infractions or repeated violations, physical correction. Can you explain what physical correction means? Initially hand spanking, progressed to belt, sometimes grabbing arms or shoulders with sufficient force to leave marks. His matter-of-fact delivery makes the content even more disturbing. Dr. Chen watches carefully for signs of distress, but Ethan continues methodically. The incident in the mall parking lot, can you tell us what happened that day? Tuesday, 4:17 p.m. Father was discussing business on his phone while walking. I became overwhelmed by sensory input, holiday music, flashing lights, crowd noise. Began rocking to self-regulate. Father terminated his call and said I was embarrassing him, attempted to physically stop my rocking. When I continued, he prepared to strike me. Miguel intervened, and after Miguel stepped in, Father took me home. Explained that public stimming was unacceptable behavior reflecting poorly on the family. Applied belt discipline. 7 strikes. Jennifer gently guides Ethan through other incidents. The fundraiser, the business dinner, the closet punishment. Throughout, Ethan maintains his precise detached delivery, as if describing scientific observations rather than personal trauma. When he describes being locked in the closet for humming during his father's conference call, Judge Diaz interrupts with her own question. Ethan, how long were you in that closet? 4 hours, 17 minutes, from 10:43 a.m. until Nora found me at 3:00 p.m. Father had forgotten to release me before leaving for a lunch meeting. The judge's expression remains neutral, but her knuckles whiten slightly where she grips her pen. Ethan, I'd like to talk about your drawing journal, Jennifer says, gesturing to the book in his lap. Dr. Chen mentioned you use it to express feelings that are hard to put into words. Would you share some of those drawings with us? Ethan opens the journal carefully, revealing the meticulously detailed illustrations. The belt, the closet, the parking lot incident. Each drawing captures not just events, but emotions, rendered with a precision that belies his age. These are very powerful, Judge Diaz observes. You're quite talented, Ethan. Artistic precision correlates with mathematical spatial intelligence, common in autism profile. The judge smiles. Well, I find them quite remarkable. When Wheeler begins his cross-examination, his approach is cautious. Richard watches on the closed-circuit monitor, his expression unreadable. Ethan, your father provided you with the best schools, therapists, and technologies available. Would you agree with that statement? Father allocated significant financial resources to my education and treatment, and he had high expectations for your behavior. Isn't it possible that what you're describing as physical correction was simply normal discipline that any parent might use? Ethan considers this. Statistical data indicates approximately 65% of American parents employ corporal punishment in some form. However, disciplinary actions resulting in bruising, welts, or persistent psychological distress exceed normative parameters. Wheeler blinks, clearly not expecting such a precise response. Your autism can make you difficult to manage at times. Your father was simply trying to help you learn appropriate behavior, wasn't he? Ethan's rocking intensifies slightly. Father's stated goal was behavioral normalization. Methods employed were inconsistent with therapeutic best practices as defined by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Autism Society of America. Wheeler changes tactics. You've mentioned your mother was frequently away on business. Isn't it possible that your father was simply overwhelmed by the challenges of caring for you alone? For the first time, Ethan appears to struggle with his response. His fingers form the Taurus constellation, their signal for rising anger or frustration. Father was rarely alone with me. Nora provided primary care. When Mother traveled, Father often scheduled late meetings or dinner engagements, minimizing direct interaction. But when he did interact with you, couldn't his strictness have come from a place of love and concern? Ethan looks up, making fleeting eye contact with Wheeler, something he rarely does voluntarily. Father told me repeatedly that my autism was an embarrassment, that I needed to overcome my neurology to be acceptable. That is not consistent with the definition of love as I understand it. The simple statement lands with unexpected impact. On the monitor, Richard shifts uncomfortably, loosening his tie. Cassiopeia, Ethan says suddenly, forming the constellation with his fingers. Dr. Chen leans forward. Ethan needs a break, Your Honor. Of course. Let's take 15 minutes. In the hallway, Ethan finds Miguel waiting exactly where he promised. No words are exchanged, none are needed. Miguel simply sits beside his friend as Ethan rocks, providing the quiet companionship that speaks louder than any testimony could. When they return to chambers, Ethan appears calmer, readier for Wheeler's. Final questions. Just one more thing, Ethan, Wheeler says. If you could tell the court what you want to happen now, what would you say? Ethan looks at his journal, then at Dr. Chen, who nods encouragingly. I want to live where stimming is allowed, where meltdowns are met with support rather than punishment. Where my neurology is acknowledged as different, not defective. He pauses, then adds with unexpected clarity, I want to be safe. As his testimony concludes, Judge Diaz speaks directly to Ethan. Thank you for your courage today. It's not easy to speak about difficult experiences, but you've done so with remarkable composure and honesty. Ethan forms the Orion constellation. One more time. Courage is statistically correlated with positive outcomes in truth-telling scenarios. Judge Diaz smiles. In my experience, that statistical correlation is very strong indeed. 6 months later, autumn leaves spiral down onto the lawn of a modest but comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood across town from the Mason estate. Through the front window, Ethan sits at a desk, carefully applying the final touches to a science project, a meticulously crafted solar system model that will be displayed at Greenfield Academy's upcoming science fair. The doorbell rings. Elizabeth answers, warmly greeting Carlos and Miguel. Come in. Ethan's just finishing his project. The interior of the house bears little resemblance to the cold opulence of the mansion they left behind. Here, walls display Ethan's artwork and astronomy posters. Sensory-friendly furniture and adaptive tools are integrated naturally into the living space. It feels like a home, not a showpiece. Ethan, Miguel's here, Elizabeth calls. Ethan looks up, a genuine smile appearing. 4 minutes early, efficient. Dad got off work early, Miguel explains, setting his backpack down. Mr. Freeman's pretty cool about scheduling now. Indeed, much has changed since Judge Diaz delivered her ruling. The temporary custody order became permanent, with Richard granted only supervised visitation, which he rarely exercises. The criminal charges resulted in a plea agreement. Richard avoided jail time but received mandatory counseling, community service hours at an autism support center, and significant financial restitution. Carlos was reinstated at Westfield Mall with back pay and a formal apology. Principal Hoffman resigned, replaced by an interim administrator, until the school board's investigation concludes. Ms. Rivera returned to teaching with renewed purpose and the support of many parents who had finally found their voices. The astronomy club meets in 32 minutes, Ethan announces, carefully packing his completed project into a protective container. We should depart in 7 minutes to ensure optimal arrival time. The astronomy club had been Miguel's idea, a way for Ethan to share his knowledge with other students while practicing social skills in a supportive environment. What began with just 3 members now includes 15 students who gather weekly at the Peterson Observatory on the mall's roof. Plenty of time, Carlos assures him. How's the new therapy going, Elizabeth? Wonderful, she answers, helping. Ethan gathers his materials. Dr. Chen recommended a sensory integration approach that's been remarkably effective. And I've adjusted my work schedule. More remote days, fewer overnight trips. The transformation in Elizabeth has been as significant. as Ethan's. She declined a major promotion to focus on rebuilding their life, discovering that presence matters more than prestige. The divorce settlement provided financial security, freeing her to prioritize Ethan's needs without career pressure. Miguel mentioned that Richard attended the last visitation, Carlos asks quietly. While the boys retrieve their jackets, Elizabeth nods. First one in 2 months. It was strained, but civil. The court-mandated therapy seems to be having some effect. He actually watched Ethan's stimming without commenting. Progress, Carlos acknowledges. The doorbell rings again. Ms. Rivera stands on the porch carrying a telescope case. Perfect timing, she says as they welcome her in. The sky should be exceptionally clear tonight. Saturn's rings will be visible. They drive together to the mall, the boys discussing constellations in the back seat. The Peterson Observatory has become their special place, neutral territory where Ethan feels comfortable and confident. As they set up the telescopes, other students begin arriving. Among them is Bradley Hoffman, whose attitude has undergone a remarkable shift since his father's resignation and the subsequent revelations about his own behavior. "Hey, Ethan," Bradley greets awkwardly. "Can you help me find Jupiter again? I can never get the focus right." Ethan doesn't make eye contact, but moves to assist. Jupiter requires precise calibration due to atmospheric interference. "I'll demonstrate the optimal technique." Miguel watches the interaction with quiet satisfaction. Months ago, Bradley had been their chief tormentor. Now, humbled by his father's disgrace and his own complicity, he's slowly learning a different way to exist in the world. Later, as the students take turns at the telescopes, Carlos and Elizabeth stand slightly apart, observing their son's progress. "I never properly thanked you," Elizabeth says softly. "What you risked for Ethan—" Carlos shakes his head. Miguel was the catalyst. That day in the parking lot, sometimes children see moral clarity where adults see complications. Across the observatory, Miguel points out the constellation Orion to a younger student. "The hunter," he explains, "symbol of courage and strength." Ethan, overhearing, adds, "astronomically significant due to the Orion Nebula, located in the Sword region, observable with even basic telescopes." Ms. Rivera smiles at their complementary knowledge, Miguel providing the mythological context, Ethan the scientific details. Together, they create a fuller understanding than either could alone. As darkness deepens, stars emerge in greater numbers. Ethan adjusts a telescope, motioning for Miguel to look. "New dwarf planet designation," he explains, "recently catalogued." Miguel peers through the eyepiece. "It needs a better name than a number. Scientific nomenclature follows strict protocols." "Still," Miguel insists, "everything important deserves a name that means something." Ethan considers this. "Like our constellation code." "Exactly." The astronomy club concludes with hot chocolate and discussions about the upcoming meteor shower. As they pack equipment, Ms. Rivera notices Ethan making notes in a journal, not his therapy drawing book, but a new one dedicated to astronomical observations. "Documenting tonight's session?" she asks. "Cataloging new constellation," Ethan responds, showing her a carefully drawn star pattern that resembles nothing in traditional astronomy. Personal designation, not scientific. The drawing shows stars arranged in the shape of 3 small figures standing together. "What's it called?" Ms. Rivera asks. Ethan points to each figure in turn. "Miguel, Mother, Self." Then, with uncharacteristic poetry, he adds, "Family constellation, not visible from previous observation point." Under the vast canopy of stars, surrounded by newfound friends and reconstructed family, Ethan Mason, no longer defined by his father's expectations or constraints, continues, charting his own unique path through a universe that finally has space for all his colors and patterns.